shipping had been blocked by sandbars on the river. All that deposit of sediment at the mouth of the river created enormous sandbars. Now, it wasn't unique. Every river in the world, every deltaic river in the world had these sandbars. But the texture of the bars on the Mississippi were much tougher than the texture on other rivers. So they were solved on places like the Danube and the Rhine, but they were not being solved on the Mississippi. And you would go down to the mouth of the river at any given time, and you would find 50 or 60 ships waiting to get over the sandbar for enough water. And you would come to New Orleans, and you'd find another 50 or 60 ships waiting to hear that there was enough water to bother going down the river to get out. So what was done was they built jetties more than 2.5 miles out into the Gulf, and they just narrowed the current of the river. It's just like tightening the nozzle on a garden hose and pointing that hose at mud. And the current of the river now just cut through the sandbars, and it created an open shipping path. But instead of dropping the sediment now on the deep at the mouth of the river where it could rebuild and sustain land, it's now being dropped off the continental shelf. And how much impact did this have on shipping and economic development of the country? In 1875, the year before the jetties were built, and this is in a caption and a photograph in the book, so I may be quoting it wrong, but the actual facts are very accessible. From St. Louis out into the Gulf, they shipped 6,500 tons of goods, 6,500 tons in 1875. 4 years later, the year the jetties were completed, from St. Louis out into the Gulf, they shipped 456,000 tons. From 6,500 tons to 456,000 tons from one city in 4 years. That's how much impact these jetties had, and obviously the entire central portion of the region of the country had the same way. And because of these jetties, Tulsa, Oklahoma is a port with direct access to the sea. Forget New Orleans, it's not the port of New Orleans. If it were just the port of New Orleans, then we could be wiped off the map and disappear, and people could go to Houston or Mobile or Tampa or wherever. Tulsa, the port of Tulsa, can't use the port of Houston. The port of Pittsburgh can't use the port, they can't use the port of Houston. I mean, actually, technically, they could get to Mobile going down the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway, but that really can't carry the kind of barge traffic that goes down the Ohio to the Mississippi. So effectively, Pittsburgh would lose its ability to import and export internationally. So it's not the port of New Orleans. It's all the cities that New Orleans makes into ports that's important in terms of the navigation interest. Anyway, partly to get back to the other causes for the disintegration of much of Louisiana, the natural flow of sediment that comes down the river, I should have said navigation last, but right now we are only getting approximately 1/3 of the natural flow of sediment that used to be in the river. Now, a lot of this is that they protect riverbanks, so riverbanks don't collapse into the river anymore. They used to collapse acres at a time and just be carried downriver. Those things are supported now. But an enormous amount of this sediment is impounded by dams that are built for a variety of reasons and almost always serve at least some flood control purpose all over the river basin, whether it's Iowa or Arkansas or on the Ohio And the amazing thing is, and most of the sediment in the Mississippi River comes out of the Missouri. The Missouri is a river that's referred to as Big Muddy, not the Mississippi. And 1/2 of all the sediment that is lost to the Mississippi River, and 1/3 of the total that used to be there, remember we've got 1/3, there are 2/3 left, half of what we've lost, is actually sitting behind dams in North Dakota and South Dakota. And these dams were built for the production of electricity in the high plains, and it goes onto the grid and serves the entire country. Now you could argue that New Orleans gets some benefits from the shipping interest. Obviously, we service the port. That's what we do here. But we don't get a damn bit of benefit from the electricity produced in the Dakotas. And yet, that retains 1/2 of all the sediment that's lost. These are enormous reservoirs that these dams created. They have a coastline longer than the state of California's coastline. They're incredible. And they're impounding sediment, other sediment behind other dams elsewhere. So there's an enormous national, regional benefit up in that part of the country, and to a certain extent national again, because the electricity goes on the grid, that we get nothing from, and yet it creates a major problem for us. And there's a USGS study that those dams were completed in 1963. And we've lost 2,000 square miles of land, but 1,700 square miles of that loss has been in the last 50 years, essentially since those dams were completed. And according to the USGS, this is a quote, after the construction of the final dam, the flow of sediment simply stopped. It's just disappeared. So that's another point. So the decline of sediment in the river, which is being, again, benefits to the whole Mississippi River Valley. Another point, another shipping interest. The Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, which runs from Texas to Florida, and also actually goes through Florida and connects on the Atlantic coast and goes up the coast. That was built for national security reasons to protect shipping from German submarines. It started construction in the 30s in anticipation of a war in which our shipping would be vulnerable. German submarines actually came up the Mississippi River. They didn't just sit there waiting at the mouth. There were actually German submarines that were in the Mississippi River at one point. So that was a real threat. The Gulf Intracoastal Waterway has been a significant contributor, although no one has ever quantified it, or not to my knowledge, of the erosion of the wetlands and saltwater intrusion. Again, national benefit, and in this case, actual direct national security. I can show you stuff that the Corps has written that says, you know, that was a major factor in logistical movement and significantly helped us in World War II, believe it or not.